Good afternoon, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we are at property address 1266 Kimberly Court Northeast here in Kaiser, located at we're at the front of the home. In fact, we're the part of the house that sticks out closest to the street. I describe everything as if you're standing in the road facing the front of the house in general in this case. So anyway, this is the part of the house that pops out closest to the roadway. The front door is kind of around that corner. That's the driveway we're looking at. So to the left of the driveway, right here next to the hose bib, we've got a 3-inch ABS cleanout. We're going to check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water's running. We're going to zero the foot counter out at the base of the cleanout. And away we go. I'm going to transition here over to, looks like 4-inch concrete pipe. Want to speak to you soon, but that is a spiffy clean pipe right there. My concern about the concrete pipe in this scenario is just the amount of trees and bushes on property, and that's what I was afraid we'd find. There's a root intrusion right there, and it's a pretty good size one. All right, round the bend here now into, oh, it's unusual. You very, very rarely see a line go from concrete to cast iron. It's almost always the reverse of that. In fact, in this case, yeah, it's still cast. Very unusual. I've been doing this for 13 years. I've cambered almost 25,000 sewer lines. I can count on my one hand how many lines I've seen go from concrete to cast iron. It's almost always cast iron first. That's usually what these houses were plumbed with on the interior. Cast iron will stretch about 5 feet outside the house, and the line will swap over to concrete. It's extremely rare to have it in the reverse. And that right there appears to be the main at about 52 feet. So we've got a couple things to look at as we come back in. We're going to let the line drain out while we go locate the camera head. And then we'll take a better look at everything. I will certainly be recommending a repair on the root intrusion as it is quite large. We also had some standing water after the roots, but we'll see how that drains out. All right, I'm getting some kind of weird locates out here. There may be a live wire underground somewhere. Not in a scary way, but it appears there may be some interference with something else out here that's putting off a signal similar to my locate. Because I'm getting locates that come in quite clear, but in different locations. I'm also looking at some paint markings out in the road that look like where the city has already marked where the main connection is. So we're going to pull back in here. I'll try and take another set of locates and see if I can catch the signal moving. But one of the better ones I got was right at the front right corner of the yard where the yard meets the driveway, which just doesn't make sense given how far out we've pushed. That's way shorter than 51 feet. It's about 30 feet. Anyway, whoever's been living here has done a fabulous job at keeping this line clean. It is superbly clean, which is an even harder thing to accomplish. In older pipe materials are just a rougher textured pipe. Although this cast iron's held up very nicely. There's very little wear and tear on it. It's just easier to get built up in older pipe materials because they have a rougher texture to them. So it's the mark of someone who's caring about what goes down line. There is not a drop of cooking oil or grease or anything in here. This standing water right here, quite minimal. This is not something I'm going to recommend to fix on. You have standing water there for barely 6 inches of pipe. Teeny tiny bit of standing water that persists past that point. It's hardly even visible. It's so minor. So that's not something I'd recommend to fix on. There is not a speck of buildup in the line I could even recommend a couple dollars in drain cleaning on. However, being that it is right here adjacent to the root intrusion, I'm going to see how these are very close together. The only reason I'm tempted, if it's not a huge inconvenience to do this, the thing that makes me nervous, when you get standing water in older materials like concrete pipe, sometimes it's an indicator you may have a joint where the grout's worn out and it's allowing groundwater to seep through. There's not a lot of spacing in that joint there, so it's kind of hard to say if that's the culprit. But sometimes that can cause older concrete pipe to settle. If the joints wear out and they start to allow dirt to flow through, it can lead to progressive settling. From the looks of it, that looks like it's probably been that way for a very long time. So if it's convenient to correct it, great. But that much standing water has almost no bearing on flow. In fact, the turn is a more significant flow obstruction right now than the standing water is. The turn probably slow things down more than the standing water would. If you were to piecemeal them out, this amount of standing water is very minor. It's not even 1/4 of an inch. And for reference, I don't even recommend repairs on standing water until there's at least 1 inch of water for 5 feet. That's with no water running at all. So with 1/4 inch of water for about 6 inches, you stand almost no chance of anything occurring there unless you're really helping it along as the homeowner. Alrighty, I'm getting around 2 foot 6 inches deep, and I figured out where the line's going. It goes out where the marking is at in the road. And that is under the stretch of hedgerow at the front of the property. What I would suggest, as long as that concrete to cast iron transition is not under the sidewalk, I would actually hack that whole section of bushes out there to get those suckers out of there. So you don't, it's gonna help you lessen the risk of a re-intrusion in time. Be a very good idea to do so. It looks like you've got roots punching through here at 7 feet, 8 feet. All right, this one's very similar depth, about 2.5 feet. Very easy to get to. They're basically under just dirt, other than dirt, grass, maybe some little bit of root coverage over top. But here's what I'd highly recommend looking into. The rest of the concrete pipe here looks good. What makes me nervous is you've got root intrusions that are spread out throughout the line. You've got a lot of foliage on this property and an aging sewer line. And to boot, it's concrete pipe, which is by far the weakest pipe out there to root intrusions. I would look at the cost difference between spot repairing both those areas versus epoxy lining at least the entire concrete section, and I would overlap that joint to the cast iron by a few feet to seal that transition up, which are the weakest joints in your line to roots. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if you could epoxy line most of this sewer line for the same cost as spot repairing the 2 locations. It's going to help to bolster the line up against further root intrusion in the future very nicely, because you're putting a jointless layer inside the pipe. First root's right there, just past the bushes, almost straight out from the clean out. The other one is in the hedges. You got to kind of look under the hedges over there to see it. But I would highly recommend looking into that prospect. A lot of the times when you're looking at spot repairs that are spread out that far, you can often epoxy line that entire section for the cost of fixing 2 different pipe joints. And the added benefit you're going to get of preventing further root intrusions is even the better part. Liners are jointless. You don't have all the weak points for roots to get through. So at the least, I would recommend those 2 locations be repaired and re-scoped after the line is buried to check for any issues. Otherwise, the rest of the line here appears to be in good condition, clean, and has good flow. The one thing that makes me a little nervous about this line is how clean it is in conjunction with some of those roots, but the fact that one root is larger tells me I don't think this line has been cleaned preemptively. Otherwise, someone should have hacked those roots out way better than that. So I think we're getting a pretty natural state look at this thing. My concern is looking into the future, where you're going to get roots next, as it's very likely to happen. It may be 5 years from now. It's hard to predict that, but I would certainly take that into account when picking what type of repair to do here.